bine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi așa e lege și scut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Cuvinte le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce-nseamnă, ce tâlcuri au sub strai. Dar dacă astăzi tâlcul de plin l-am priceput, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. самых до крайних, южных гор до северных морей. Человек проходит, как хозяин необъятной родины своей. Тут жизнь невольна и широка, точно Волга полная течет. Молодым везде у нас дорога, старикам везде у нас почет. Никто у нас не лишний, по заслугам каждый награжден. Золотыми буквами мы пишем всенародный сталинский закон. Этих слов величие и славу никакие годы не сотрут. Человек всегда имеет право на учение, подвиг и на труд. Весенний ветер веет, каждым днем все радостнее жить. И никто на свете не умеет лучше нас смеяться и любить. Но сурово брови мы насупим, если враг захочет нас сломать. Как небесную родину мы любим, бережем, как ласковую мать.
и без оплат. И нас не согреет треск речей под барабанный раскат. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам. И так как все мы люди, то должны мы, извините, что-то есть. Хотят накормить нас пустой болтовней, чертям спасибо за честь. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам. И так как ты рабочий, то не жди, что нам поможет другой. Себе мы свободу добудем твою своей рабочей рукой. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам. Modern in the cities, ready out in der Arbeiter, Arbeitsfront, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам. Ready out in der Arbeiter, Arbeitsfront, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Sretna pod suncem, rasti u jaslama dječjim, rasti i cvjetaj zemljo ravnih ljudi, i neka mir nad tvojim ljudima vlada, mir tvojim lađama napučini i tvome danu što se vedar budi. Rasti sretna da svi narodi vide, sa strana svih, sa juga i sjevera, kako se rađa i kako se voli, kako se brani zemlja proletera. Srce pita, rasti cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srce pita. Sreći u vodi i u zraku, u pjesmi strojeva i u sjaju žita. Rasti i cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Rasti i cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije
Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is the evening of May 21st, 2025. And here we are again. It's another live stream. There wasn't going to be one tonight, but there was simply too much out there in the world to comment upon. And so I had to jump on here with this. So be sure to like and share the stream if you haven't done so already. Be sure to subscribe to the various channels that we're on if you haven't done so already. So we are live currently on YouTube, X, on the old Red Star Radio channel on Twitch, and on Kick for the very first time. I gave up trying to stream to Facebook because that apparently leads to all kinds of disasters. So here we are. And we got 2 items on the agenda for this evening, along with your comments, of course. So I'm going to just put those on screen, if you'll bear with me just a moment. Yes, okay. There we go. So the 2 items on the agenda for tonight are, of course, Donald Trump's apartheid enthusiasm, which, of course, we really shouldn't be surprised by. I'm sure that it was something that he shared in common with Joe Biden when Joe Biden could remember what apartheid was. The other being the apparently ongoing issue of why, or the need to explain why communists must be against pornography and against prostitution, something that apparently the various ridiculous denizens of the Western left have completely forgotten about, and most have become like defenders of pornography, defenders of the so-called sex trade, etc. So we apparently need to keep on explaining this, as some of these guys just can't stop being wankers. To use a rather crude joke. So we will be getting to that later on in the episode, but we will begin, as is customary, with our top story, which is, of course, the extraordinary scenes in the White House between Donald Trump, a man who is defined by his color, and the color is orange, but the only color that really defines him is his love of the green, and Cyril Ramaphosa, a man with whom I thought that Donald Trump would have much in common, given that Ramaphosa is also a lover of money above everything else, and has sold out the values that he once proclaimed that he believed in, and become, at the very least, a multi-millionaire in the post-apartheid South Africa, one of the politically connected black South African bourgeoisie, who was implicated in a massacre of striking miners back in 2012, a former miners' union leader, no less. Would have been, I thought, Donald Trump's ideal type of guy, but apparently they didn't get on, because Donald Trump is being fed his political talking points by right-wing meme generators. Now, what do I mean by this? I will, of course, demonstrate, so allow me to show what I mean. So this is from Trump's press conference, or sit-down, with Ramaphosa, which, as you can see, Ramaphosa is already looking slightly awkward. So let's go through this, and then we're going to talk about what it actually means.
Turn the lights down. Turn the lights down, and just put this on. It's right behind you. Johan.
There's nothing this parliament can do. With or without you, people are going to occupy land. We require no permission from you, from the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do. Who are you to tell us whether we can occupy land or not? We are going to occupy land. South Africa occupy land. That's who we are. Can we drop my membership from this useless parliament?
Right, so if you're not aware of what's going on there, Trump is playing a video of Julius Malema, who is the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters. Malema left the ANC, having previously headed its youth wing, over a decade ago. So this isn't someone who's actually in Ramaphosa's party. I mean, Malema, I'm aware that there are criticisms of him from a Marxist point of view, but he heads what I regard as a pretty serious organization in the form of the EFF, and actually wants to see genuine land redistribution done in South Africa. So quite why Trump thinks that playing Malema to Ramaphosa, who probably fucking hates Malema, is some kind of own. I'm not sure, other than maybe that Trump thinks that all black South Africans are the same. So anyway, we will continue.
A revolution demands that at some point there must be killing, because the killing is part of a revolutionary act. Shoot to kill, Gaza, kill the poor, the farmer, kill the poor, the farmer, pa, pa, pa.
Yeah, this continues for quite some time. I don't think I need to bore you with Trump's little video display here. He goes on and on and on, showing these videos of Malema, which I'm not quite sure what point Trump is trying to prove here. But again, Trump is getting everything here from like right-wing memes. He isn't, of course, thinking about this. So let's continue with Trump's comments. Right, so Trump continues to show this, and for another few minutes, and I'm not going to bother like boring you with the rest of it. Essentially, it's the usual stuff from Trump, which is getting all of his talking points for about when meeting a foreign leader from like right-wing meme generation sites, basically. So if I just go back and hang on. So I'm just going to remove that. Right. So Trump like shows a video of like Julius Malema and others from the EFF and some from the ANC, like singing songs from the liberation struggle, and accuses Ramaphosa of carrying out a white genocide. Now, as I've already commented on X, if anything, Trump is entirely consistent with other US presidents in that he gets mad about fake genocides whilst facilitating or directly carrying out real ones. And certainly that's true of Trump. Whilst he is trying to carry out mass population expulsion and mass slaughter of the Palestinians from Gaza, he's weeping and wailing about white farmers in South Africa. There you go. He is entirely consistent with every other US president in the post-World War II era in that. Now, let's just think about, though, what all of this actually means. Now, all of this stems from, of course, the incredibly mild land redistribution plans of like the ANC government. And we are now 31 years, long time, after the formal end of apartheid. And South Africa, as we covered when we talked about the South African elections a while ago, remains dominated economically by the same collection of mining companies and big landowners that ruled the roost like 30 years ago. And what has happened is that a group of largely politically connected black bourgeoisie has been allowed to join the party, but it's the same monopolists who dominate South Africa's economy, which is why, well, the ANC Freedom Charter was junked, why progressive social reforms were not carried out after 1994, why the great majority of the black proletariat, both urban and rural, remain poor and will have stayed poor for over 30 years, and why the ANC is an increasingly discredited and very corrupt organization. So, if anything, Trump is accusing Ramaphosa of something that Ramaphosa would be the very last person in the world who would actually carry it out. And again, this is something where Trump is repeating many of the steps taken by one of his predecessors, which is Reagan. Reagan, well, whoever was programming Reagan at the time, whose cognitive facilities were about the same as Joe Biden's by the end, Reagan used to do sort of get weepy and wail about the white South African farmers. In fact, he offered them asylum, I believe, in the middle 1980s. There was talk of them being taken to Texas. Hunter S. Thompson wrote about it. So again, Trump is not doing anything particularly original here. Now, the mythology of the white genocide in South Africa, I mean, this comes directly from the propaganda of the later period apartheid racialist regime. That's where it comes from. This idea that the black South Africans were going to fall upon the whites and slaughter them all in a sort of orgy of bloodletting, and therefore all the whites needed to stick behind the apartheid government to the bitter fucking end. And so that's where it stems from. It comes directly from the apartheid regime's own propaganda, and it got taken up by the usual coalition of like ultra reactionary groups that are organized principally out of the USA and Britain, which include like out and out fascist organizations. In fact, they're mostly out and out fascist organizations, which sort of feed ultra reactionary talking points into so-called mainstream bourgeois politics. So this is a racist conspiracy theory that was dreamed up originally by the propaganda system of the apartheid regime, that became something that was beloved of people like the late and unlamented Eugene Terreblanche, which has been taken up directly by people like Tucker Carlson, which is how it's made its way into Trump's abandoned barn of a brain. And this is why he's sitting there confronting Ramaphosa with this shit. Now, to go back to what the ANC's old policy on land was, and I'm going to just read now from the Freedom Charter, which was a policy document adopted by the ANC in 1955. This is when the ANC was in a formal alliance with the South African Communist Party, when that meant something, and was in a more radical phase that it ended up being in. So when it comes to the land ownership, which of course was all stolen by the white farmers, who Trump loves so much. When it comes to the land, this is the policy. The headline reads, "The land shall be shared among those who work it. Restrictions of land ownership on a racial basis shall be ended, and all the land redivided amongst those who work it to banish famine and land hunger. The state shall help the peasants with implements, seed, tractors, and dams to save the soil and assist the tillers. Freedom of movement shall be guaranteed to all who work on the land. All shall have the right to occupy land wherever they choose. People shall not be robbed of their cattle, and forced labor and farm prisons shall be abolished." Now, that's the original commitment to the Freedom Charter, which has never been implemented. It's never been got near. So this is what was abandoned in 1994 under the pressure of imperialism, and of course it helped that the Soviet Union had collapsed, the counter-revolution in Eastern Europe had triumphed, and the rest of the socialist world retreated for many decades. So the deal that the ANC tried to sell to their proletarian followers was the one where the vote was got, but the economic structure of the country remained the same. And now the ANC's popularity is slowly withering away. Ramaphosa and co have tried to do some mild land redistribution. And of course, you get these howls of protest from these international fascist networks, which is who comes up with this shit. And this is where it all comes from. And I'll say this, like, the British and the American ruling class is and remain and has always has been like an enthusiast for the apartheid system. They wouldn't have abandoned the apartheid system had it not been losing an almost quite literal war against the ANC-led resistance movements. they would not have abandoned apartheid. They didn't want to. It just became dangerous for the mining monopolies that make a lot of money and operate very important business. So because it was starting to endanger the mining business, that's why they turned on apartheid. It wasn't because they suddenly wanted to treat black South Africans as human beings. It wasn't anything to do with that at all. Same is true of Rhodesia, by the way. What was Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. You see like all kinds of like right-wing millennials and some fucking Zoomers weeping and wailing about the Ian Smith regime. The Ian Smith regime, if you're not familiar with it, in Rhodesia was beaten in a war by the Zimbabwean National Liberation Forces, headed by Robert Mugabe, who played a heroic and revolutionary role back then. And it is an objectively highly progressive event that the Rhodesian racialist regime was destroyed, was defeated in a war, which is why they had to surrender, essentially. And the same is true of the apartheid system. The apartheid regime was losing in a battle against the black proletariat, headed by the ANC and the SACP. It wasn't exclusively a black struggle, but it was largely a black struggle. There was significant support amongst different layers of the white population. But the racialist regime in Pretoria was losing. And it was because of that they rushed Mandela out of prison and started negotiations. That's why. And it was the extreme misfortune of the South Africans that the repulsive Gorbachev clique managed to carry through their counter-revolution in the USSR, because had that not been the case, then that Freedom Charter would have probably been implemented, and imperialism would have not been able to present itself as some kind of neutral arbiter. As it was, the South African proletariat got shafted, and if Ramaphosa had any balls left, or had any interest in actually furthering the liberation struggle, he would go back to South Africa right now, tell Trump to go fuck himself, and say the Freedom Charter will be implemented in full. That's what he should do. He won't, of course, because Ramaphosa is a bourgeois, and one can only hope that some combination of revolutionary forces triumphs in South Africa and gives the big landowners something to really fucking cry about, and gives the international network of reactionaries something to get actually angry about, rather than the fake genocide that they're weeping and wailing about now. Quite frankly, fuck these people. And I know and have known people from the last like 6 or 7 years, which, as Marius has rightly commented in the chat, because like the wokeists scream racist at everything, some of these people whose thinking doesn't rise above the level of the wokeists just take like the opposite turn and go, oh well, then I guess we'll be racist now. So they end up they just end up becoming the opposite, becoming the very thing that their woke opponents accuse them of being. They end up like making long videos about the great loss of Rhodesia, or the great loss to human civilization of the apartheid regime, or Portuguese-run Angola, or why everything would have been all right if Jonas Savimbi had triumphed, or something like that. It's completely fucking disgraceful nonsense. And if that's the kind of politics that you stand for, then quite frankly, you have the intelligence of a single-celled organism. And quite frankly, no one should have any fucking time for you whatsoever. If you're basing all of your politics on internet disagreements with annoying wokeists, then again, like, seriously reassess your life. Now, it's no surprise that Trump had fucking Elon Musk in there, whose father Errol is a profiteer from, I believe it was an emerald mining operation in Zambia. Yeah, that's where his money started off. So again, this is the imperialism with the mask off, because every inch of the American and British bourgeois political systems is steeped in civilizational supremacy, steeped in racialism, And just because they let a few non-white people into the corridors of power, that doesn't change that. The bald fact is that the system that they stand for, their pillaging of the entire world, involves mainly, but not exclusively, pillaging majority non-white countries. And to justify that requires a good deal of racialism to be pumped into the system to proclaim your civilizational supremacy. Biden would have done the same things, but he wouldn't have been quite so crude about it when he still had all these marbles. Trump is just the crude mask-off version of the American system. Just as, like, the likes of Nigel Farage are a bit more mask-off over here. But this is what you get when the liberation struggle is not concluded, and the South African liberation struggle is not concluded, because it's still the same monopolists which dominate the South African economy, the same big mining companies, the same big landowners. And until the resources, including the minerals and the land, are in the hands of the masses, then the liberation struggle, as I say, is not completed in South Africa. So let's deal with some of these chats here. Right. Let's see. Where are we? We have with us tonight in the chat James Graham, Nikki Const, Robeson, Chandler, Chicken Pot Pie, Albert, Sid Hatfield, Victor, Dr. Ahmed from Egypt, CD5 SSM fan. We also have Orimus. Yes, I will be posting a full track listing on the Telegram channel. Hello to Comrade Daniel, David Ball, Marius, Aziz from Sydney, Australia, Mo 1917 from Denver, Tim Gray, Jonathan Foster, Thomas Wolf, Comrade Jawad, Vera, Evgeny, Levi from Chile, South Australia, Tracy Wilkinson, who enjoyed the Decline and Fall episode earlier on, Sun Chu, Chris Cox, Shady X, who joins us from South Africa itself, Why I Ain't Cool, Keel Jones says Biden single-handedly rescued Mandela from prison, Rambo style. Yeah, I hear he killed 500 guards, like that fight scene from Commando, where Arnold takes out an entire army full of miscellaneous South American mercenaries. Hello to Richard Madden. Marius, I've referenced that very correct comment that you made. Why I Ain't Cool is enjoying seeing the comments there. That's well, glad you're enjoying that. It's a new feature on this the Restream service I'm using. So who else we got here? Mario says, I don't think Trump knows ANC and EFF are different parties. I don't think Trump even knows who Ramaphosa is, to be completely honest. Mode 1917 says, power to Julius Malema and the EFF. Hello to Philip Blair. Daniel says, Trump carrying on the legacy of the Afrikaners, Rhodesians, and all our favorite white supremacists. Yep. The apartheid regime just missed a trick. If they'd have held out for another few years, they could have had some really serious meme action being orchestrated for them by Elon. Trump attacking BRICS nations, Brazil next, says David King. Sid Hatfield says a lot of out-and-out fascists from the Third Reich actually migrated to South Africa post-1945. South Africa had a political system in place that was much to their liking. Yeah, of course it was. Well, bear in mind also that the Third Reich's political system was very much inspired by Britain and the United States. Keel Jones says, don't white people still own like 85% of the land in South Africa? Yeah, I think that is largely true. Maria says ZANU-PF actually carried out the land reform in Zimbabwe and was ceaselessly demonized for it. South Africa doesn't do it and winds up getting condemned anyway. Might as well go ahead and do it. Yeah, I mean, Zimbabwe asked the British to abide by their side of the, I think it was the Lancaster House Agreement, which did provide for land redistribution. The British consistently refused to abide by the agreement that they'd signed. Surprise, surprise. And so Mugabe correctly just went ahead and did the land redistribution anyway, and got essentially like we got like a years long racist campaign against the Zimbabweans for must be like 6, 7, 8, 9 years, probably longer, in the British press. That was like really like hardcore like racialist stuff that they were doing. And this was like the supposedly liberal left press that were like demonizing the Zimbabweans constantly every single week. And just goes to show that they were forced to make certain concessions. They were forced out of direct occupation of the colonies. They were forced to concede independence. But my God, do they hate it? My God, do they hate having to actually surrender their positions to the colonized people. And when Mugabe actually started reclaiming the land, they tried to sanction the country to death and reduce it to abject poverty, defending the domination of the land by the white farmers. Keel Jones says, Anya Power and Pills, good buddy Tucker Carlson. Yeah. Yeah, well, by your friends shall ye be known, I think is the best way I can respond to that. Philip Blair says, reminds me of a documentary about Cuba, a Cuban-American woman talking about her family lost their free ranches. Yep. Always feel sorry for the property owners. Marius says, either South Africa takes more radical course or they'll be recolonized in a neo-apartheid and Zionist coup. Well, they've already got those forces in place to do it. That's what the Democratic Alliance is. It's a reconfigured national party. I mean, I don't think that they'd go for like a full-on openly racialist regime anymore. Then again, I wouldn't be surprised. Nothing would surprise me perhaps these days. But I think that the more likely outcome would be that the Democratic Alliance would fulfill its threats to essentially try and break the wealthier region of the country, I think it's the Western Cape, away from South Africa and declare independence. That's the threat that they've always got lingering in the background. But the fact is that, like, you might as well take the radical measures. You might as well do it now. Now, of course, the ANC is not going to fucking do it. Ramaphosa's not going to do it. But the South African proletariat should force that action. Because if not, then South Africa is just going to dwindle away into poverty and misery, whilst the same land and mining monopolists continue to dominate it. Call the DA's bluff. Let them try and do it. Otherwise, you're going to end up with essentially the apartheid system, but just run by black people. You know, what kind of a deal is that? You know. Maria says Musk and his cronies want to resurrect the apartheid regime and recolonize Angola and the Congo as well into a massive free trade zone. That would not surprise me in the slightest if that was their if that was the plan of some of them. Musk has probably been playing Hearts of Iron or something until 6 a.m. and getting very excited. Good morning to Ash on the other side of the world. Severy Mick Diost says, attributing the collapse of the USSR solely to the actions of a revisionist clique, by the way, without acknowledging the underlying systemic deficiencies feels inadequate to me. Well, your comment feels inadequate to me. So I think I'm going to briefly reply and say it was the revisionist clique that essentially started the undermining of Soviet power in 1953. And there was a long-term struggle in the Soviet Party, which unfortunately the pro-capitalist element, it won due to the, I would say, the failures of their opponents to sufficiently understand the challenges that were facing them, and the ultimate failure of the opponents of the revision of the pro-capitalist counter-revolutionary clique. The ultimate failure was their failure to understand the ongoing role of the masses in the revolution, and their failure to, when needed, to mobilize the masses against the pro-capitalists. What you observe when in the 80s is that at every turn, Gorbachev, Yakovlev, and the others were in the minority. They were in the minority when in the Politburo when Chernenko died. They were in the minority in terms of their support in the Supreme Soviet. They were in their minority in terms of the wider support amongst the Soviet population of everywhere other than like the Baltic states and Georgia and Armenia. And that wasn't an irretrievable position either. So at every stage, they were a small minority who got what they wanted, who carried through the counter-revolution, because at each stage, the forces that were opposing them, which were the great majority of the population, were disorganized and were unable to mount a fight back. Why? Because essentially, and this is the biggest crime of the revisionists, they had depoliticized the masses, so that even those who opposed the liquidation of the CPSU in the Soviet Union, even those who opposed the counter-revolution, had no idea of how to fight back, and were actually more scared of trying to mobilize the masses than they were of the end of the USSR. They didn't want the end of the USSR, but they had no comprehension of what to do to save it, because they had become essentially frightened bureaucrats, and that's the biggest problem. And it started in the 50s, and that counter-revolutionary layer was always there. They were there in the 30s. This is why there was the massive the purges that did happen in the 1930s. It was targeted at these layers: the Trotskyites, the Bukharinites, the out-and-out saboteurs, the intelligence assets. These were the people who would have done what Gorbachev did in the 80s, Bukharin and Trotsky would have done in the 30s. Because of they got correctly suppressed, imprisoned, or killed, then they had to proceed more cautiously in the future. And there was a battle in the party, but unfortunately, their opponents had no idea how to conduct the struggle. Unlike Stalin, who knew how to mobilize the masses when he needed to, against the bureaucracy, against the party hierarchy. He knew how to conduct that struggle, not without risks, of course, not without errors sometimes, but the struggle that could be waged and properly against the counter-revolutionaries was done in the 1930s, which is why Stalin is hated so much. So this is the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that knowledge and experience of the 1930s was buried, and this is why they bury Stalin. This is why Khrushchev attacked Stalin, because the Stalin era personified the correct way to approach these the struggles against the counter-revolutionaries in the party. And as Mao pointed out, and as Lenin knew, and Stalin, the biggest threat is not just from the imperialists who are constantly threatening and plotting, scheming against you, but the biggest threat, the biggest danger comes in the hierarchy of the party itself. And Lenin, Stalin, Mao all understood that, which is why they waged various struggles against them. And as Marius points out in the chat, for all the terrible mistakes, this is Marius's comment, of the Cultural Revolution in China, it did repoliticize the common people and keep the revolutionary wing of the CPC strong enough to resist capitalist restoration. Yes, and this is, I mean, there was a lot of mistakes made in the Cultural Revolution, undoubtedly, but the fact is that the masses remained highly politicized in China, and also the revolutionary wing remained strong even after the suppression of the Gang of Four, who again made an awful lot of mistakes. It has to be said. There was the ultra left turn in the 60s, particularly like theories of like social imperialism, which ultimately led the CPC into like a very incorrect alliance with US imperialism in certain areas of the world. A lot of mistakes got made, but ultimately, this is part of the reason why the CPC stood up against the counter-revolutionary attempt that was made in 1989 by the CIA and MI6 through their student cutouts and by the internal counter-revolutionaries led by Zhao Ziyang. Zhao Ziyang, the general secretary of the CPC, ended up living the rest of his life under house arrest, which is what should have happened to Gorbachev. In fact, a lot worse should have happened to Gorbachev. But at the very least, he should have ended up like Zhao Ziyang. When he moved to dismantle the power of the CPSU and moved to restore capitalism by essentially allowing the gangster element off the leash, he should have immediately been arrested and put under house arrest for the rest of his life. And that would have been the moderate approach. Unfortunately, the revolutionary wing of the Soviet Party was too weak with insufficient roots within the masses to lead a real fight back. Anyway, so it's kind of a diversion, but we'll continue going through the comments. Hello to Colchester Ian. Hello to Char Paul, who says, I have seen a white friend who is a strong establishment critic with lots of knowledge go into the white genocide march while having an Asian wife. Yeah, well, some people are very fucking confused. Look, if someone's into the white genocide myth, then they've basically retreated into a fantasy world, which is all I can say about it. And a lot of these people are riven with contradictions. They'll have like black friends, Asian friends, etc. But they, for some bizarre reason, like to indulge in like these white supremacist fantasies. And the only thing I would ever say to such people is like, pull your head out of your fucking ass, because this is not only are you like uttering this complete contemptible reactionary nonsense, but also if you're working class and you're indulging in this shit, you're ultimately shooting yourself in the kneecaps, because the myth of white supremacy, the poisonous nonsense of it, this was something that was dreamed up by the ruling class in the West, particularly Britain, France, Germany, the US. They've dreamed this up, this sort of racial hierarchy, this racialist ideology. They dreamed it up in order that they could justify and bring proletarian support to for the imperialist system. And ultimately, you're conning yourself by pretending that you, as a white worker, have got something in common with the ruling class, that you're somehow on the same side, that you're somehow have a shared interest in the oppression of the African nations, of the Asian nations, of the Latin American nations, that you and Elon Musk are on the same side. That is an utterly foolish position. And ultimately, you are only undermining your own real interests by engaging in this ridiculous fantasy. Okay. Sid says, I'm starting to think that the USSR was far more permeated with unmolested Western intelligence assets than I had previously assumed. Yeah, that's something that I have only discovered quite recently, Sid, to answer your point. Yeah, the reason why they, and again, I've said this before, the reason why the West kept going apeshit about like human rights in the Soviet Union was nothing to do with concern about repressive activity against the poor Soviet peasant or something. It was in order that their own intelligence assets could basically be left alone by the KGB. That's why they were screaming about it all that time. That's why it's such a terrible mistake to make any concession over this. It's why the human rights industry should be called out for what it is, which is that it's always been a cutout for the intelligence agencies of the West, particularly the CIA and MI6. That's why they kept like screaming about the dissidents, the poor dissidents, people who would sell the entire Soviet nation, all of the Soviet nations, into slavery and abject poverty for a few dollars. Con men, crooks, fraudsters, gangsters who like hide behind the fact that they've been rightly sent to prison for a few years. The dissidents should have been fucking spat on, to be completely honest, because look what they have wrought. And again, like I was reading a biography of Vladimir Shevitsky, the last, I would say, communist who ran Ukraine, the Ukrainian SSR, who is condemned by the Ukrainian nationalists and the West for his evil, repressive activities. What was he doing? Well, he was repressing Banderites. He was repressing fascist elements in Western Ukraine. That's what Shevitsky was doing. It's why Gorbachev wanted rid of him. Gorbachev wanted all these counter-revolutionary elements to be let off the leash. And so, like, that's what when they cry and wail about human rights, what they mean is, will you please allow our intelligence assets to run riot? Because that's the demand they made to the Yugoslav government. Please allow the fascists that were bankrolling and arming to run riot and undermine and destroy the integrity of the state. So there you go. Right, moving on then to the next part of our agenda, which is, of course, as advertised, moving on from Donald Trump's defense of apartheid to the Western left's defense of pornography and prostitution. And now, this has come up before in the context of a discussion of Alexandra Kollontai, but I wanted to just go into it again because this is recently there was controversy kicked off in Scotland over a bill that would bring in more legal restrictions against men who use prostitutes. And every time this happens, every time anybody tries to bring in a restriction against the loathsome sex trade or pornography, you have a selection of Western leftists who start screaming about restrictions on free speech and you need to stop being prudish, etc., etc. What about bodily autonomy? Prostitution is just the same as being exploited by any capitalist, etc., etc. And this is the just absolute like guff and mental sewage that we have to fucking trawl through when it comes to the Western left. And I wanted to address this. It is absolutely the case that all communists should be militantly opposed to prostitution and to pornography, both of which are hyper-exploitative, lumpenized trends, shall we say, which are, of course, certainly when it comes to pornography, big money for various capitalist interests, much of which are also, of course, linked into various intelligence agencies, and also big money for lumpen elements such as organized crime. So, how is it then that the Western left, including ridiculous institutions like Verso Books and the DSA, why is it that they all got so into this? And I think it lies ultimately in and again changes in the material base reflecting into ideology. And what do I mean by this? Like the deindustrialization of the Western nations that took place from in the post World War II era coincided with like fundamental changes in the ideological composition of the Western left, personified, of course, by the ridiculous figure of Herbert Marcuse, who I've talked about before. Marcuse came to the conclusion in One Dimensional Man that the proletariat in the West was now no longer a revolutionary agent, and therefore only those who were excluded from the proletariat were going to be capable of making a revolution. So racial minorities and also lumpens. That was part of his analysis. Now, he later backtracked on that, but this One Dimensional Man was a very big hit and was a very big influence in leftist circles. The other big influences, of course, the French theorists, people like Foucault and we all know about his predilections, and the wider influence, which is the promotion, the active promotion of what I would call like left bourgeois ideology in the so-called Marxist groups, because as these groups became more and more divorced from the proletariat, as the old communist parties decayed and degenerated into just becoming social democratic, social chauvinist organizations, they all did become in the end. The Western left stopped reflecting any proletarian values whatsoever, and certainly stopped being revolutionary, and just went into the worship of lumpenization and also lumpen culture and criminal culture, and also became absolutely obsessed with so-called sexual freedom, meaning the active promotion of like a very distorted and twisted form of human sexuality that is a favorite of the left end of the bourgeoisie, which leads them to endorsing prostitution on the grounds of bodily autonomy, which is, you know, a completely ridiculous point of view, because like, how is it that, you know, women, and it is mainly women, but there are some men in this cohort who are compelled by force of economic circumstances to sell themselves by the minute and the hour to perverted men, and it is overwhelmingly men who use the services of prostitutes, to how is it bodily autonomy that someone is that desperate that they allow themselves to essentially be raped? What autonomy is there that somebody is compelled by sheer poverty and desperation into doing that? And the bourgeoisie, of course, has tried to dress up, sort of put a lot of window dressing on prostitution in the last 30 years or so. If you look at things like Confessions of a Call Girl, the book, and then the series with what's her name, Billie Piper in it, again, it's very much about glamorizing prostitution, and this is something that the Western left has largely swallowed whole. Unions these days in Britain routinely vote for the recognition of so-called sex worker unions, most of which seem to be run by pimps. And you wonder why these people have any objection to Andrew Tate, given that they are apparently in favor of his business model. But this view, this very poisonous view, is now very, very common. So that the Western left is dominated by groups which are pro-prostitution, they are pro-pornography, and ultimately this is part of what leads them to be pro-gender ideology as well. And all of this paints a horrifically distorted picture of sexual relations between human beings. It's like it presents a massively, horrifically commodified version of human sexuality, which bears no real relation to actually the way that human beings should relate to each other, which is producing objectively very, very harmful behaviors in, again, unfortunately, men. Let's be honest about this. It is men that mostly use the services of prostitutes, both female and male. And this is dangerous. This is dangerous stuff, and it is ridiculous. Ridiculous reactionary position that most of the Western left has taken, that they will defend all of this stuff, because again, most of the Western left puts forward a point of view which is derived from the left end of the bourgeoisie. That's where most of their points of view come from. They're not derived from interaction with the proletariat. They're not derived from a serious application of Marxism-Leninism to analyzing our current situation. In fact, most of these leftist groups are anti-Leninist and anti-communist. So therefore, it should be no surprise that they are, of course, in favor of the most degenerated and rancid parts of bourgeois culture, and that then they would continue to defend this, even when the harm that it does is manifesting all around us, just tells you how far gone the Western left is. It's irredeemable now, absolutely irredeemable. There is no point saving it. It went into the fucking toilet after World War II, accelerating with the influence of revisionism, and accelerated further with the influence of the individualistic forces that came to dominate after the abdication of the French and Italian communist parties from a vanguard role by 1968, when the French and Italian communist parties became reactionary, social democratic, social chauvinist organizations and converted to Eurocommunism. When that happened, they surrendered all claims of revolutionary leadership. And who moved into that void in Western Europe? Well, it was the so-called libertines, the rabid individualists, the Trotskyites, the cartoon Maoists, all of whom, of course, are very big fans of the bastardization of human relations via the promotion of what I'm going to refer to as like the promotion of emptying sexual relations of all actual emotional content. That's very much what happened. So when you get the communist parties abdicating their leadership role, you get to the point where where those who sort of dominate the so-called revolutionary left are essentially people who have a point of view which is entirely derived essentially from the more radical end of the bourgeoisie, and their adoption of like bourgeois attitudes is what leads them to be pro-prostitution, pro-pornography, and ultimately to be in favor of things like gender ideology, because gender ideology presents like a distorted and pornographied view of women as like a model. And because that's what most of these, like, quite frankly, insane or extremely disturbed men who get into this stuff, that's the model of women that they want to sort of turn themselves into. It is absolutely, of course, bizarre, I would say, pathology that these men are displaying, and that the left embraced it. Didn't just indulge it; they embraced it and continue to embrace it to this day. And so, when I say that the entire Western left needs to be essentially dragged outside, shot, thrown in a pit, and burnt, that theoretically speaking, that's what I mean. It is an irredeemable disaster. It has endorsed the most antisocial, anti-woman, anti-proletarian trends possible. It does not strive towards a unified and revolutionary working class. It fetishizes freakishness, bizarre behavior, and extremely damaging tendencies, and seeks to promote them within the proletariat. And this is why most of the proletariat quite rightly rejects these pieces of garbage, because they are anti-worker. They promote bourgeois values. They promote counter-revolutionary tendencies. They will never unite the working class against the ruling class, because they're not interested in that. That's not their job. Their job is to continually replicate divisions within the working class. And also, it's worth saying that as we are now in a 35-year plus long effect of counter-revolution following the collapse of the USSR, it's worth revisiting Stalin's words, which made in an interview that he gave in the 30s, which is that if the USSR collapsed, that the working class of the entire world would be seized by the throat. And that's what's happened over the last 30 years. And instead of reckoning with that, the Western left has gone down the route of obsessing over like the promotion of like bizarre sexual practices, ignoring the fact that like the female half of the proletariat has been essentially seeing its position eroded, and the gains that women workers made in previous years attacked and destroyed. And this is, again, been largely ignored by the Western left. They have not dealt with it. They don't want to deal with it. They would rather it be ignored. And so when we say that the Western left is a disaster zone that is best jettisoned, this is part of what we're talking about. It is a complete and utter barren desert of incredibly reactionary practices that from which we can learn nothing except negative examples. This is undeniable now. The defense of prostitution, their defense of pornography, their defense of gender ideology, all of this condemns all the groups and individuals who make these defenses as reactionaries, to be discarded. They are agents of the bourgeoisie. Whether the individuals in these organizations understand that that's what they're doing or not, let's judge them on the outcome of their actions, not what they proclaim themselves to be in favor of, but what their actions objectively achieve. And what their actions objectively achieve is to destroy working class movements when the leftists move to infest them, and to create divisions everywhere and chaos everywhere. Reject the Western left, all of it. Put it in the fucking bin. Okay. Right. So let's go and go through some comments. A Dingo Ate Me Baby says, where for DSA, etc., where for bodily autonomy, unless you don't want an experimental jab. Good point. The commodification of the human body, says Sid. Yes. Disgusting freak, says Jenny. Ava Jordan on Kick says, hey men. Okay. If only Tate endorsed trans rights, then the US left would love him, says Marius. Yes, that might be his next move. If he's desperate, he might have to go trans. Then he can join the DSA. Sid says it's gone a long way to destroy human intimacy in the West. Yeah. I mean, human intimacy can be a genuinely beautiful thing. And like pornography and the pornographied culture has done its best to erode and destroy that. And also think of the mentality. Think of how degenerated you've got to be as an individual to value pornography over human relationships, or to think that like handing over money to rape a woman represents anything other than a crime. If it did go in the toilet, what became known as the new left, says Sid, appears to me to have been the old right discovering new tricks. Interesting point. Mary says the trans ideology took off because so many abused pornography that developed really twisted fetishes. Very good point from Mary. Marius says queer theory and sex positivity. Yeah, I mean, I know this is I'm not picking up on something here, but like I would put the sex positivity there in very heavy inverted commas. In the 80s, I'll continue with Marius's comment now. In the 80s and 90s, have caused massive damage to the left's credibility with working people. Alistair Page McGill says, I found it suspicious how the men's rights movement disappeared, seemed to disappear when the trans rights started to take hold. Yeah, it's the same people. Yeah, the incel phenomena too. Well, they're trying to bring that out. Lenin Dubois, whoever you are, says, so you're anti-trans. Yes, and the flag's fucking ugly as well. Sid says, we need to figure out where the left was during the 30s and just start over at that point. Disregard everything that happened since. Decent point there. Alistair Page McGill says, none of these trans rights trolls could even say what rights even are. It seems to be the right to harass women wherever they want to. That's basically it. Maria says they confuse legal and formal rights in the liberal sense with cultural and social acceptance, which are entirely different things. Philip Blair says, except for the strange racism and sexism and homophobia, 1940s radio sitcoms are a lot more progressive and honest about and family friendly, less annoying too, frankly. Never listened to one. I'll have to take your word for that. Negus Afro Danedoll says, no self-respecting black males would show up to the White House. I am proud of Eritrea and Burkina Faso. Useless, expendable black South African men, no backbone. Okay. The commenter goes on to say, the meeting with Trump by South Africa shows why they are expendable and corrupt. Long live the EFF. Good point. Daniel says, I do feel sad for the upcoming generations who are going to struggle attaining any meaningful human relations. I think the thing is, like, the meaningful human relations will we can overstate the damage done, but it is significant. And I think the biggest thing is, like, you've got to encourage the upcoming generations to get off the fucking internet, to be honest. Go outside, do literally anything else other than sit online and, like, obsess over weird shit, to be honest. All right. Okay, so gone through most of the chats there. So thanks to the 347 of you that we have watching at the moment. And I'm going to draw things to a close for this evening. It's a bit of an impromptu stream, this one, prompted by me getting extremely angry about the apartheid bullshit. Yeah, we'll be back with you again tomorrow for a pre-recorded episode. So please join us again then. Again, thanks to everybody who supports the show on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. Thanks to everybody who subscribes to the various different channels. We're currently live on YouTube, Twitch, X, Rumble, and Kick. Be back with you again tomorrow. Until then, thank you and good night.